The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Commander Riley Stone kept sipping it anyway. Sleep felt impossible when the deep space sensors kept picking up strange signals from the void. Her ship, the Terra's Pride, drifted silently through the darkness. Between stars, leading a small fleet of 4 human vessels on what was supposed to be a routine exploration mission. The communication officer suddenly straightened in his chair. "Commander, we're getting something unusual on the long-range array." Stone walked over to his station, her boots making soft sounds on the metal deck. The other ships in their small fleet, the New Horizon, Iron Will, and Endurance, maintained perfect formation around them, their crews probably dealing with the same boring routine of deep space travel. "What kind of something?" she asked, looking at the strange pattern scrolling across his screen. "It's definitely artificial, very weak, but it's been repeating the same sequence for, well, it looks like it's been going for a very long time." The young officer touched his controls, and speakers filled the bridge with a haunting series of tones and electronic pulses. Dr. Lisa Wang, their language specialist, hurried over from her station. She had been trying to sleep in the small rest area behind the bridge, but the unusual activity had woken her up. "This is completely unlike anything in our databases. The mathematical patterns suggest it's definitely a language, but the structure is totally alien." Stone felt her heart rate increase. After 30 years of space exploration, humanity had found many strange things among the stars. Unusual planets, bizarre weather patterns, even some simple life forms, but never anything that looked like intelligent communication from another species. "Can we figure out where it's coming from?" Stone asked. Navigation Officer Torres was already working on that problem. "The signal is coming from the Altair system, about 3 weeks away at our current speed. But, Commander, the signal, strength and degradation patterns suggest this transmission is very old, maybe 200 years or more." Wang worked furiously at her computer, trying to break down the alien message. "I'm getting some basic concepts. There are repetitive elements that might be numbers or coordinates. But there's something else. The emotional tone of this message feels desperate." "Emotional tone?" Stone raised an eyebrow. "The way the patterns repeat and intensify. It reminds me of distress calls, but much more complex. Like someone trying to tell a very important story before—" Wang paused, looking troubled. "Before what?" "Before they die." The bridge fell quiet except for the soft humming of life support systems. Stone looked around at her crew. They were all young, eager explorers who had signed up for adventure among the stars. None of them had expected to find something like this. Liu Wei, the fleet's senior scientist, joined them from his laboratory. "Commander, I've been analyzing the signal characteristics. This isn't just a simple message. It's a massive data package, compressed and repeating. Whatever species sent this, they wanted to make sure the information survived for a very long time." Stone walked to the main viewing window, looking out at the stars. The Altair system was invisible to the naked eye from their current position, but she knew it was out there, waiting. "What kind of information?" "That's what we need to find out," Liu said. "But based on the size of the data package and the power, requirements to keep broadcasting for 2 centuries, this was incredibly important to whoever sent it." The communication officer looked up from his station. "Commander, I'm also detecting something else. The signal isn't just repeating the same message. It's adapting, trying different frequency patterns and mathematical structures, like it's designed to keep trying until someone smart enough to understand it comes along." Stone felt a chill run down her spine. An automated system that had been calling out into space for 200 years, constantly trying new ways to communicate, hoping that someone would eventually hear it and understand. What kind of desperation would drive a species to build something like that? "Options?" she asked her senior staff. Torres spoke first. "We could report this to Earth Command and let them send a proper first contact team. That would be the safe, regulation approach." "How long would that take?" Stone asked. 2 years minimum, Probably 3 or 4 with all the committee meetings and preparations they'd want to do. Liu shook his head. Commander, this signal has been broadcasting for 2 centuries. Whatever happened in that system, it's long over. But the fact that we're receiving it at all means we're probably the first ones to get close enough and have the right equipment to detect it. Wang looked up from her translation work. I'm starting to get more fragments. Words that might mean help and remember and genocide. The word hung in the air like a physical weight. Stone closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the implications. If another intelligent species had once lived in the Altair system, and if something terrible had happened to them, then humanity was looking at the first evidence of interstellar conflict. Commander, the communication officer said quietly, there's one more thing. The signal isn't just coming from one location in the Altair system. I'm detecting relay stations, like they built a whole network to make sure this message would reach as far as possible into space. Stone opened her eyes and looked at her crew. These people had trusted her to lead them safely through the dangers of deep space exploration. Taking them toward an unknown situation in an alien star system was exactly the kind of risk that regulations were designed to prevent. But regulations had never contemplated receiving a 200-year-old cry for help from a dead civilization. Set. Course for Altair, she said. Maximum sustainable speed. Torres nodded and began entering navigation commands. 3 weeks, 2 days at full burn, as the Terra's Pride and its escort ships changed course and accelerated toward the mysterious signal? Stone wondered what they would find waiting for them. The message continued its haunting repetition, growing slightly stronger as they approached its source, carrying the hopes and fears of a species that might no longer exist. Whatever had happened in the Altair system 200 years ago, humanity was about to discover that the galaxy was far more dangerous and complex than they had ever imagined. The first thing they noticed was the silence. After 3 weeks of traveling toward increasingly strong alien signals, the sudden quiet felt wrong. Dr. Lisa Wang sat at her communication station, adjusting frequencies and checking equipment. But the mysterious transmission that had guided them across space had simply stopped. Sensor sweep complete, reported Torres from navigation. The Altair system has 6 planets, 3 of which show clear signs of previous habitation. His voice carried a note of amazement mixed with dread. Through the main viewing screen, the human fleet could see what remained of an alien civilization. Massive orbital structures hung like broken jewelry around the second planet, their metal frameworks twisted and dark. The planet's night side glowed with the cold light of dead cities, their geometries unlike anything humans had ever built. Commander Stone felt her stomach tighten as she studied the tactical displays. Those aren't natural formations. Liu, what's your analysis? The scientist worked at his instruments, his face growing pale as data streamed across his screens. Commander, these worlds were bombarded from orbit. The crater patterns on the 3rd planet are consistent with systematic destruction of population centers. Someone wanted to make absolutely sure nothing survived. Lieutenant Commander Park, who commanded their small marine contingent, pointed at the tactical display. Those orbital platforms weren't just destroyed, they were hunted down. Look at the debris patterns. This was methodical professional military work. The crew exchanged worried glances. They had come expecting to find either a living civilization or perhaps some ancient ruins. Instead, they had stumbled across what looked like the aftermath of genocide on an interstellar scale. The signal source appears to be coming from the outermost moon of the 4th planet, Torres reported. It's small, mostly rock and ice, probably not naturally habitable. Which makes it a perfect place to hide something, Stone mused. Park, prepare a boarding team. We're going to find out what our alien friends wanted to tell us badly enough to broadcast for 2 centuries. The shuttle bay of the Terra's Pride opened to release a small exploration craft carrying Park and 5 specialists. As they approached the source moon, their sensors detected artificial structures built deep into the rock face, camouflaged to look like natural geological formations. "Clever," Park said over the communication link. "From a distance, this looks like just another dead rock, but up close I can see airlocks and what might be antenna arrays." The facility appeared to be running on automatic systems, powered by what looked like fusion generators built into the moon's core. Park's team found an airlock that responded to their approach, cycling open to reveal corridors lit by soft blue lights. "Atmosphere is breathable for humans," reported Rodriguez, their environmental specialist. "But it's been recycled by machines for a very long time." The corridors led to a vast chamber filled with crystalline data storage units and holographic projectors. As soon as Park's team entered, the room came alive with images and sounds. Three-dimensional recordings began playing, showing beings unlike anything humans had ever imagined. The aliens were tall and graceful, with 4 arms and skin that seemed to change color based on their emotions. Their cities were organic in design, growing like plants rather than being built like human structures. Most importantly, they appeared to be completely peaceful, with no visible weapons or military technology in any of the recordings. Dr. Wang's voice came through the communication system from the Terra's Pride. "Park, we're receiving the translations. Now." These beings called themselves the Threnodi. They were terraforming specialists, capable of transforming dead worlds into gardens. The holographic recordings showed the Threnodi's work. Barren planets slowly becoming covered with life. Ocean worlds where they guided the evolution of complex ecosystems. Gas giants where they built floating cities that harvested resources, without damaging the natural environment. But then the tone of the recordings changed dramatically. The peaceful scenes were replaced by images of war fleets approaching Threnodi worlds. Ships of 3 different alien designs working together with military precision that the Threnodi had no hope of matching. They call themselves the Hegemony, Wang translated as the recordings continued. 3 species that formed an alliance for conquest: the Vorth, who provide massive numbers of brutal warriors; the Nexari, who create powerful energy weapons; and the Quellan, who coordinate fleet, tactics, and strategy. Park and his team watched in horror as the recording showed the systematic destruction of Threnodi civilization. The peaceful aliens had tried to negotiate, offering their terraforming knowledge in exchange for being left alone. The Hegemony's response was to demand complete surrender and enslavement. When the Threnodi refused, the war fleets came. "This is genocide," Park said quietly. "They didn't just conquer these people, they wiped them out completely." The final recordings showed the last Threnodi survivors building the hidden facility, knowing they would not live to see it completed. Their message was simple but desperate: warn others about the Hegemony and stop them before they consumed more innocent civilizations. "Commander," Wang's voice carried new urgency, "the data includes current intelligence on Hegemony movements. They're still expanding, still destroying peaceful species. Their next target is something called the Kythera, located in a system about 2 weeks from here." Stone felt ice form in her stomach. "How recent is this intelligence?" "Based on the astronomical data, the attack on the Kythera system is scheduled to begin in approximately 1 month. The bridge of the Terra's Pride fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had discovered alien life, but not the way they had hoped. Instead of peaceful first contact, they had found evidence of an ongoing campaign of interstellar genocide. Liu spoke first. "Commander, we have to report this to Earth Command immediately. This changes everything about humanity's place in the galaxy." "Earth Command is 4 months away," Stone replied. "By the time they receive our message and decide what to do about it, the Kythera will be dead." Torres looked up from his navigation station. "The Kythera system is only 2 weeks away. We could reach them before the Hegemony attack begins." "And do what?" Liu asked. "We're 4 ships against what appears to be an entire military alliance. The Threnodi were more advanced than us and had time to prepare, and they still lost. Parks' voice came over the communication system from the alien facility. Commander, there's more data here. Technical specifications, ship designs, tactical analyses. The Threnodi spent their final months studying their enemies, looking for weaknesses. They found some interesting patterns. Stone looked around at her crew, seeing fear mixed with determination in their faces. They were explorers, not warriors. But they were also human, and humans had never been good at walking away from injustice. Pack, download everything. All of it. If we're going to make a decision about this, I want every piece of information those people died to preserve. As Park's team worked to copy the Threnodi archives, Stone stared out at the dead worlds of the Altair system. 200 years ago, this had been a thriving civilization. Now it was nothing but ruins and automated messages, a monument to what happened when peaceful species met predators among the stars. The question now was whether humanity would learn from the Threnodi's fate or repeat it. Earth Command's response came exactly as Stone had expected. Return immediately for full debriefing. Do not engage unknown hostiles. Do not initiate first contact protocols. She deleted the message and kept flying toward the Kythera system. Commander, you realize we're essentially going rogue, Liu said, though his voice held more curiosity than criticism. Earth Command will not be pleased. Stone looked at the data displays showing Threnodi intelligence about the Kythera. The species appeared to be crystalline in nature, living in vast underground cities and possessing remarkable defensive technologies. They were also completely unprepared for military assault, having developed no offensive weapons or fleet combat. Tactics. Earth Command thinks in terms of months and committees, Stone replied. The Kythera have weeks before the hegemony arrives. Sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. The Kythera system was beautiful. 7 worlds orbited a stable yellow star, 3 of them showing signs of extensive habitation. But unlike human cities that sprawled across planetary surfaces, Kythera settlements were built downward, creating crystalline networks that extended deep into planetary crusts. Their first contact protocols were unlike anything humans had prepared for. When the Terra's Pride entered the system, massive crystal formations on the innermost planet began resonating in complex harmonic patterns. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, like music made from living stone. Dr. Wang worked frantically to establish communication. They're using harmonic frequencies to transmit information. It's incredibly efficient but completely different from electromagnetic communication. Within hours, they had established basic contact. The Kythera were fascinated by the humans, but deeply troubled by the warning about the approaching hegemony. Elder Prime, speaking for the Planetary Council, resonated messages of gratitude mixed with despair. They know the hegemony is coming. Wang translated the harmonic patterns. Scouts have been probing their outer system for months, but their response has been to dig deeper and hope the invaders will eventually leave. Lieutenant Commander Park studied the tactical information the Kythera provided about their own capabilities. Commander, these people have incredible defensive technology. Their underground cities are nearly impregnable and their crystal-based systems can absorb and redirect enormous amounts of energy, but they've never developed anything that could threaten an attacking fleet. Stone found herself in the strange position of trying to convince an alien species to prepare for war. The Kythera had evolved as a peaceful civilization, building their society around harmony and preservation rather than conflict and destruction. They don't understand the concept of preemptive strike, Wang explained after another long communication session with Elder Prime. To them, attacking someone who hasn't attacked you yet is morally incomprehensible. But the Kythera were also highly intelligent and capable of learning quickly. When Stone's team showed them the Threnodi records of hegemony tactics, the crystalline beings began to understand the true nature of their approaching enemies. The breakthrough came when Liu discovered that Kythera crystal technology could interface directly with human computer systems. Their living crystals could process information and adapt to changing conditions faster than any human artificial intelligence. "This changes everything," Park said as he worked with Cathara engineers to link their defensive systems with human tactical databases. Their crystals can run thousands of combat simulations simultaneously, finding optimal responses to hegemony attack patterns. More importantly, the Cathara underground cities could serve as perfect command centers for coordinated defensive operations. Their tunnel networks extended across continents, allowing rapid movement of personnel and equipment while remaining completely hidden from orbital observation. Stone began developing a strategy that played to both species' strengths. The humans would provide tactical knowledge, adaptive thinking, and the willingness to take aggressive action. The Cathara would provide advanced defensive technology, perfect intelligence gathering, and impregnable bases of operation. "It's not enough," Torres said during one of their planning sessions. "Even with perfect coordination, we're talking about 4 human ships and maybe a few hundred Cathara volunteers against a fleet that destroyed an entire advanced civilization." Park had been studying the Threnody military analyses. The hegemony wins through overwhelming force applied to unprepared opponents. But they've never faced coordinated resistance or adaptive tactics. Every species they've conquered has tried to meet them in conventional warfare. Stone looked at the holographic display showing the Cathara system. "What if we don't fight them conventionally? What if we make them fight our kind of war instead of theirs?" The Cathara proved to be remarkably quick learners when it came to unconventional warfare. Their natural ability to reshape crystal structures made them perfect for creating hidden weapon emplacements and camouflaged defensive positions. Their harmonic communication networks could coordinate activities across entire planets without using electromagnetic signals that enemy sensors could detect. "They're natural guerrilla fighters," Park observed as he watched Cathara volunteers practice rapid deployment techniques. "They just never realized it because they never had a reason to fight." Liu made another crucial discovery while analyzing hegemony ship designs in the Threnody archives. The 3 hegemony species have very different technologies and tactical preferences. The Vorth prefer brute force assaults, the Nexari rely on precision energy weapons, and the Quellan coordinate everything from heavily defended command ships. "Meaning?" Stone asked. "Meaning their alliance is based on complementary strengths, but those same differences could be turned into weaknesses if we can force them to operate outside their preferred tactical doctrines." Wang looked up from her analysis of hegemony communication intercepts. "There's something else. The alliance appears to be held together by continuous success and shared spoils. The Threnody data suggests there's significant tension between the 3 species when operations don't go as planned." Stone began to see the outline of a strategy that might actually work. The Cathara's defensive capabilities could deny the hegemony. The quick victory they expected. Human tactical flexibility could keep the invaders off balance and unable to use their preferred strategies. And if the battle lasted long enough, the internal tensions within the hegemony alliance might become critical weaknesses. "We're going to turn the entire system into a trap," Stone explained to Elder Prime during their final planning session before the hegemony arrived. "Not a trap designed to destroy them, but one designed to exhaust them and force them to make mistakes." Elder Prime's harmonic response carried notes of both hope and fear. The Cathara had committed themselves to fighting for survival, but they still struggled with the concept of deliberately causing harm to other beings. Stone understood their reluctance. Humans had their own moral qualms about warfare, but they also had a long history of choosing to fight when the alternative was extinction. As the combined human-Cathara forces made final preparations, long-range sensors detected the first hegemony scout ships entering the outer system. The war was about to begin, and everyone involved knew that failure would mean not just military defeat, but the complete destruction of another peaceful civilization. The question now was whether 4 human ships and their new crystalline allies could accomplish what no other species in the galaxy had managed: stopping the hegemony's seemingly unstoppable expansion across the stars. The hegemony arrived like a plague of metal locusts, 53 warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a perfect formation that spoke of centuries of coordinated conquest. Admiral Vox of the Quellan surveyed the Kithara system through his flagship's sensors, expecting to find the same pattern as always. A peaceful species cowering in their cities, waiting for inevitable destruction. Instead, his sensors showed him empty space and silent planets. Where are their defense? Fleets? Growled Commander Thack of the Vorth, his massive frame filling the communication screen with scarred flesh and predatory hunger. The intelligence reports indicated they possessed significant technological capabilities. Perhaps they fled, suggested Nexari fleet leader Yinth, her elegant features displaying the cold contempt her species held for any beings who chose flight over fight. Many species abandon their worlds when they detect our approach. But Admiral Vox had not survived 300 campaigns by underestimating opponents. Something felt wrong about this system. The planets showed clear signs of habitation, yet there were no orbital platforms, no defensive formations, no desperate communication attempts to negotiate surrender. "Deploy scout formations," he ordered. "Full sensor sweeps of all inhabited worlds." That's when Commander Riley Stone sprang her first trap. The Iron Will materialized from the shadow of an asteroid, launching every missile in its arsenal at the closest Vorth heavy cruiser before disappearing back into the debris field. The attack lasted 12 seconds and destroyed a ship that had participated in the conquest of 14 worlds. "Contact!" Thack roared over the communication channels. "Unknown vessel using primitive kinetic weapons, pursuing!" 3 Vorth destroyers broke formation to chase the Iron Will, following it deeper into the asteroid field, where Lieutenant Commander Park had spent 2 weeks placing hidden mines and weapon platforms. The destroyers died in sequence, torn apart by explosions that seemed to come from the rocks themselves. Admiral Vox studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Primitive kinetic weapons suggested a species that hadn't developed advanced energy shields, but the tactical execution was far more sophisticated than anything they had encountered from primitive civilizations. "Nexari squadrons, begin orbital bombardment of the 3rd planet," he commanded. "Standard genocide protocols." That's when Elder Prime activated the Kithara defensive networks. The planet's surface erupted with crystalline formations that rose like flowers made of living stone. Each crystal caught and redirected the Nexari energy beams, turning the bombardment into a light show that illuminated the planet without causing significant damage. "Impossible!" Yinth's voice carried shock that quickly turned to rage. "No known species possesses energy reflection technology of this magnitude." Stone watched the battle unfold from the New Horizons command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of the 4th planet. Kithara crystal networks fed her perfect real-time intelligence on every hegemony ship movement while keeping her own forces completely hidden from enemy sensors. "Phase 2, she commanded. The Endurance, humanity's supply ship, revealed itself near the system's outer edge, broadcasting what appeared to be a desperate distress call. When a squadron of Quellan interceptors moved to investigate, the supply ship opened like a flower to reveal hidden weapon batteries and launched a swarm of automated attack drones. The Quellan ships found themselves fighting an opponent that split into dozens of smaller threats, each one adapting its tactics in real time based on their responses. Half the squadron was destroyed before they realized they were fighting artificial intelligences programmed with human combat doctrines. "What species are we facing?" Admiral Vox demanded, as his carefully planned assault dissolved into chaos. The answer came when Stone broadcast a message on all hegemony frequencies. Her image appeared on their screens, clearly alien to all 3 species, but radiating the kind of calm confidence that spoke of dangerous competence. "I am Commander Riley Stone of the human fleet Terra's Pride." You are trespassing in Cathara space and committing acts of aggression against a peaceful species under our protection. Withdraw now, or face the consequences. The three hegemony commanders reacted exactly as Stone had hoped they would. Thak laughed with bloodthirsty amusement, Yinth responded with cold disdain, and Admiral Vox began calculating tactical adjustments for fighting an unknown opponent. Humans, Vox mused. Not in our intelligence databases. Probably a recently spacefaring species attempting to play protector. He was partially right. Humanity had only been exploring interstellar space for 50 years. But those 50 years had been spent learning hard lessons about survival in a dangerous galaxy, and humans had always been remarkably good at adapting other species' technologies to their own purposes. The Terra's pride revealed itself by firing every weapon it possessed at the Hegemony flagship. The massive Quellan vessel's shields absorbed the attack easily, but the assault served its real purpose, drawing the entire enemy fleet into a pursuit that led them directly into the Cathara system's inner planets. That's where Stone's real trap waited. The Cathara had spent 2 weeks reshaping their crystal networks into a 3-dimensional maze of sensor reflections and energy redirections. Hegemony ships found their targeting systems confused by false readings, their communications disrupted by harmonic interference, and their movements channeled into kill zones where concentrated firepower could overwhelm even advanced shields. More importantly, the extended battle was forcing the 3 hegemony species to operate outside their preferred tactical doctrines. Vorth ships designed for direct assault found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't pin down. Nexari energy weapons proved less effective against opponents who used superior mobility rather than attempting to match firepower. Quellan coordination began breaking down as their communication networks struggled with interference they had never encountered before. These humans fight like nothing we have ever seen, reported Fleet Leader Yinth, after losing her 3rd ship to what appeared to be an empty patch of space. Their tactics adapt faster than our responses can compensate. Commander, Thak was having his own problems. His warriors excelled at close-quarters combat, but the humans refused to engage in the kind of direct confrontation where Vorth advantages would be decisive. Instead, they struck from concealment, destroyed isolated targets, and disappeared before retaliation was possible. "Cowards!" he roared. "Face us in honest battle." Stone's response came in the form of coordinated attacks on 6 different Vorth vessels simultaneously. Each attack used different tactics: mines, drones, manned fighters, and even kamikaze runs by automated decoy ships. The variety made effective defense impossible, and half the Vorth fleet was crippled within an hour. Admiral Vox found himself fighting a war he didn't understand against an enemy that seemed to treat military doctrine as a starting point rather than a fixed set of rules. Every time his forces adapted to human tactics, the humans changed their approach completely. Worse, the strain of extended combat was beginning to show cracks in the Hegemony alliance. Vorth commanders demanded more aggressive tactics, Nexari. Leaders wanted to withdraw and return with overwhelming force, and Quellan strategists struggled to coordinate allies who were arguing with each other as much as fighting the enemy. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving communication, intercepts from human command networks. They appear to be coordinating with the Cathara defenders, using their crystal technology to process tactical information faster than our computers can match." Vox stared at the tactical displays, showing red icons representing destroyed or damaged hegemony vessels. In 300 campaigns, he had never lost more than token forces in the initial assault phase. Now, after 6 hours of fighting, he had lost nearly a third of his fleet to opponents who shouldn't have been able to challenge a single hegemony destroyer. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning, and somewhere in the asteroid, fields and crystal caverns of the Cathara system, Commander Riley Stone was preparing to show the hegemony exactly what happened when predators encountered prey that fought back with intelligence, coordination, and the kind of stubborn refusal to surrender that had made humans successful survivors in a hostile galaxy. 3 weeks into the battle, Admiral Vox made the mistake that would end the hegemony's reign of terror across the galaxy. Faced with an enemy that refused to die according to established military doctrine, he called for the reserve fleets. 200 additional hegemony warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, representing the largest military concentration in the Alliance's history. The message was clear. Whatever species dared resist the hegemony would be crushed with such overwhelming force that no other civilization would ever make the same mistake. Commander Riley Stone watched the enemy reinforcements arrive and smiled grimly. The trap was now complete. All units, implement Deathworld protocol, she broadcast on encrypted channels that reached human and Kythera forces throughout the system. Deathworld protocol was humanity's answer to overwhelming odds. Turn the entire battlefield into a hostile environment where superior numbers became a liability rather than an advantage. The concept came from humanity's own violent history, refined by 50 years of dangerous deep space exploration. The first phase began with the Kythera crystal networks. Elder Prime had spent 3 weeks learning to think like a human military. Commander and the crystalline being had proven remarkably good at it. Across all 7 planets, crystal formations began resonating at frequencies that interfered with hegemony ship systems. Navigation computers developed errors, communication networks experienced constant static, and weapon targeting systems began, firing at false readings. The massive hegemony fleet found itself blind and deaf in a system that seemed actively hostile to their presence. Phase 2 was psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Lieutenant Commander Park had studied every piece of Threnody intelligence about hegemony species psychology. Vorth warriors valued strength and feared being seen as weak. Nexari commanders prized precision and became enraged when their perfect plans failed. Quellan strategists needed clear information and predictable outcomes to function effectively. Stones. Forces systematically attacked each species' psychological weaknesses. Vorth ships found themselves fighting opponents they could never catch, their massive strength useless against enemies that struck and vanished like ghosts. Human fighters would appear just long enough to damage a Vorth vessel, then disappear into asteroid fields or Kythera tunnel networks, leaving the warriors with nothing to fight but empty space and growing humiliation. Nexari precision was countered with chaos. Every time a Nexari squadron achieved target lock, human drones would detonate nearby, filling space with debris that disrupted sensors. Kythera crystals would suddenly shift position, turning carefully calculated firing solutions into wild misses. The elegant Nexari battle doctrine collapsed into frustrated improvisation. Quellan coordination was broken by information warfare. Human hackers, aided by Kythera computational abilities, fed false data into hegemony communication networks. Orders became confused, unit positions were misreported, and the careful tactical coordination that had conquered dozens of worlds dissolved into friendly fire incidents and tactical blunders. Phase 3 was the killing blow, turning the hegemony's greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. Sir, Admiral Vox's tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "We're losing ships faster than we can track. The enemy appears to be everywhere at once, using tactics we can't predict or counter." Vox stared at his displays in disbelief. 200 ships should have been able to crush any resistance through sheer firepower. Instead, his massive fleet was being carved apart by enemies that seemed to multiply every time he destroyed one of their vessels. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than he realized. Stone had turned the entire Kythera system into a weapon, using humanity's greatest advantage, adaptability, to create a form of warfare that the hegemony couldn't comprehend, much less counter. Human ships would attack, retreat into Kythera. Tunnel networks emerge somewhere completely different, and attack again with entirely new tactics. Kythera defenders would coordinate perfect ambushes, disappear underground, and pop up behind hegemony formations that thought they had achieved tactical superiority. Even worse, both species were learning and improving with every engagement, sharing information through crystal networks that processed tactical data faster than any hegemony computer system. The breaking point came when Commander Thak, desperate to prove Vorth's superiority, led his remaining ships in a direct assault on what appeared to be the human command center. His warriors smashed through defensive positions and reached the planet's surface, only to discover they had been fighting automated decoys while the real command center coordinated attacks from an entirely different location. Half his assault force was destroyed by hidden weapon emplacements before he realized the trap. The other half found themselves cut off and surrounded, fighting an enemy that knew every tunnel and defensive position while they stumbled blind through an underground maze. "This is impossible!" Thak roared over increasingly static-filled communication channels. How can primitive aliens fight better than species with centuries of military experience? The answer came from an unexpected source: Fleet Leader Yinth, whose Nexari forces had suffered the heaviest losses. "They're not primitive," she transmitted on a channel that reached all 3 hegemony commanders. "We've been fighting the assumption that any species we hadn't encountered before must be inferior. These humans and their Kithara allies represent something we've never faced, a coordinated defense by species that learned warfare specifically to counter our tactics." Admiral Vox felt a cold certainty settle in his mind as he analyzed the battle statistics. In 4 weeks of fighting, the hegemony had lost over half their total fleet strength, not just damaged, completely destroyed, with no hope of recovery or repair. Meanwhile, human and Kithara forces seemed to be getting stronger, not weaker. Every destroyed human ship was replaced by new tactics that made their remaining vessels more effective. Every Kithara defensive position that was overrun led to improved coordination and deadlier ambushes. Stone chose that moment to offer terms. "Admiral Vox," her voice carried across hegemony communication networks with crystal clarity, "you have a choice to make. Continue this battle and watch your alliance destroy itself, or accept that some species will fight back when threatened with genocide." "The hegemony does not negotiate with inferior species," Vox replied, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Then you've learned nothing from the deaths of your warriors," Stone responded. "Look at your casualty reports, Admiral. Look at the coordination failures between your 3 species. Look at how this battle is tearing your alliance apart." D was right, and Vox knew it. The strain of extended combat against an adaptive enemy was revealing every crack in the hegemony's foundation. Vorth commanders blamed Nexari precision for being too slow to adapt. Nexari leaders criticized Quellan coordination for being too rigid. Quellan strategists accused both allied species of tactical incompetence. The final blow came when Lieutenant Commander Park led a boarding action against Vox's flagship itself. Human Marines, equipped with Kithara crystal technology that made them nearly invisible to sensors, appeared throughout the massive vessel like deadly ghosts. They didn't try to capture the ship. Instead, they systematically destroyed communication equipment, navigation systems, and life support controls. Park himself reached the bridge, standing face-to-face with Admiral Vox while the Quellan commanders' own guards lay unconscious around them. "Your species has conquered dozens of civilizations," Park said calmly, "because you only fought species that tried to match your strengths. You've never faced enemies who turned your own advantages against you." Vox stared at the human Marine, seeing something in his eyes that the Quellan had never encountered in 3 centuries of conquest: absolute confidence backed by demonstrated competence. "What do you want?" Vox asked. "Surrender," Park replied. "Complete withdrawal from Kithara space, full tactical intelligence on all hegemony military capabilities, and a guarantee that your alliance will never again attack peaceful species." "And if we refuse?" Park gestured toward the tactical displays showing the systematic destruction of the hegemony fleet. Then we continue this battle until your alliance tears itself apart and your three species spend the next century fighting each other instead of conquering innocent civilizations. Admiral Vox looked around his ruined bridge, listened to the reports of chaos throughout his fleet, and made the decision that would end the hegemony's reign of terror. I accept your terms. The surrender of the hegemony fleet sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Within months, dozens of species that had lived in fear of conquest were sending delegations to the Cathera system, seeking to understand how two unknown civilizations had accomplished the impossible. Commander Stone found herself reluctantly famous as the human who had defeated the galaxy's most feared military alliance. But she understood that the real victory belonged to something larger than any single species or battle. We didn't win because we were stronger, she explained to the gathering of alien ambassadors in the rebuilt Cathara Council chambers. We won because we proved that cooperation between different species can create capabilities that no single civilization can match. Elder Prime's harmonic voice carried notes of deep satisfaction. The Threnody archive has served its purpose. Their sacrifice ensured that their killers would never again destroy peaceful civilizations. Dr. Wong had spent months analyzing the intelligence captured from hegemony data cores, mapping the locations of species they had conquered and worlds they planned to attack. There are 17 civilizations in this sector alone that were marked for destruction. All of them are now free to develop their own defenses or join our alliance. The galaxy would never be the same. The defeat of the hegemony proved that aggressive expansion was not inevitable, that peaceful species could defend themselves when they worked together, and that predators among the stars were not unstoppable. But perhaps most importantly, it established humanity's role in galactic civilization, not as conquerors like the hegemony, but as protectors who would stand with any species threatened by those who confused strength with the right to destroy others. As Stone watched the first ships of the new Galactic Defense Alliance take formation around the Kithera homeworld, she thought about the message that had started it all, a desperate cry for help from a dead civilization broadcast across space, for 200 years until someone finally heard it and decided to act. The Threnody were gone, but their legacy lived on in every species that would now grow and flourish under the protection of the alliance they had made possible. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from those who lived to see them, but from those who sacrificed everything to make them possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal gardens of Rilani Prime when the first bombs fell. Dr. Avin Koril was feeding the luminescent flower colonies in his laboratory when the ground shook beneath his feet. The delicate organisms he had spent years cultivating scattered like frightened children, their soft blue glow flickering in distress. 3 months. That was all it had taken for the Brutok Empire to crush 17 star systems and reduce proud civilizations to ash and memory. The Rilani Federation, once the jewel of the outer spiral, now stood as the last barrier between the savage invaders and the peaceful inner worlds. Avon pressed his thin fingers against the window as another explosion lit the sky. His people were dying, and there was nothing their advanced technology could do to stop it. The Rilani had evolved on gentle worlds, where the greatest predator was no larger than a house cat. They had never learned to kill, never developed the instinct for violence. That seemed to drive species like the Brutok. The communication device on his desk buzzed with urgent priority signals. Avon reluctantly turned away from the burning sky to answer. The holographic image of Chancellor Dren Valor appeared, her usually pristine white fur now disheveled with stress. "Dr. Koril, we need you in the emergency council chamber immediately," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Bring everything you have on the humans." Humans. The word sent a chill through Avon's spine. For months he had been studying fragmentary data about this mysterious species from a distant corner of the galaxy. The information was sparse and contradictory, gathered from traders and explorers who spoke in whispers about creatures from a death world called Earth. Avon gathered his files and hurried through corridors filled with fleeing civilians. The council chamber, usually a place of calm deliberation, buzzed with desperate energy. Military advisors pointed at holographic displays showing red markers advancing across their territory like a spreading plague. Each marker represented a world lost, millions of lives snuffed out by Brutak's savagery. Chancellor Valor raised her hand for silence as Avon entered. Dr. Coral has been researching a species that might be able to help us. Tell them what you've learned. Avon activated, his portable display showing grainy images and data fragments. The humans inhabit a planet called Earth, in what they call the Sol system. By all accounts, their world should be uninhabitable. Crushing gravity that would flatten most species, an atmosphere toxic to many life forms, and constant natural disasters that would wipe out any reasonable civilization. A military advisor leaned forward. And they survived this? More than survived. They conquered it. Their entire evolutionary history is one of constant warfare, not just against their environment, but against each other. They have a saying translated, roughly as survival of the fittest, that appears to be their core philosophy. Murmurs of unease rippled through the chamber. The Rilani prided themselves on their peaceful nature, their ability to solve problems through discussion and compromise. The idea of a species built for war was both fascinating and terrifying. "What do we know about their capabilities?" asked General Tren Kozak, the Federation's highest military officer. Avon manipulated the display, showing blurry recordings from a trading post encounter. Very little concrete information. They appear to be bipedal, roughly our size, but much denser due to their high-gravity evolution. Traders report they move with what one called predatory efficiency. Most concerning is their apparent comfort with violence. One report describes humans resolving a station conflict through what they called negotiations backed by superior firepower. The chamber fell silent, except for the distant rumble of explosions. Everyone understood the implications. The Rilani had no concept of such negotiations. Chancellor Valor stood slowly. "Our own military estimates give us perhaps 2 weeks before the Brutak reach our core systems. Our fleets are destroyed, our colonies evacuated or abandoned. We face a choice between extinction and asking these Deathworlders for help." "But Chancellor," protested Councillor Even Sale, "we know nothing about their intentions. What if they're as savage as the Brutak? Then we face the same extinction. But at least we will have tried something different," Valor replied grimly. Avon found himself speaking before he realized it. "The fragmentary reports suggest they have moral codes, rigid ones. The trading post incident was resolved with minimal casualties, and the humans apparently helped rebuild damaged sections afterward. They may be violent, but they seem to distinguish between enemies and innocents." "Seem to," echoed Councillor Thale. "We're betting our entire civilization on seem to." Another explosion, closer this time, rattled the chamber. Through the windows, they could see Brutak fighters streaking across the sky like mechanical locusts. Chancellor Valor looked around the room, meeting each councillor's eyes. "All in favor of authorizing first contact with the humans?" The vote was swift and unanimous. Faced with certain extinction, even the most cautious councillors chose the unknown over death. Avon found himself assigned to compose humanity's first official contact message. He sat in the communications center, staring at a blank transmission screen while battles raged in orbit above. How did one ask a species of warriors to save people they had never met? He began typing, his delicate fingers trembling slightly. "To the human species of the planet Earth, we are the Rilani Federation. We are dying. The Brutak Empire has declared war on all peaceful species in this sector. Our people have no experience with violence, no instinct for warfare. In 3 months, They have destroyed 17 of our worlds. We have perhaps days before they reach our capital." Avon paused, knowing his next words would either save his species or damn them. "We know you come from a dangerous world that made you strong. We know you understand war in ways we cannot. We are not asking you to die for us. We are asking you to teach us how to live. If there is mercy in your warrior hearts, if there is honor in your code, please help us. We offer everything we have in exchange for our survival." He encrypted the message with their best translation protocols and broadcast it toward the Sol system at maximum power. The signal would take weeks to reach Earth, assuming it was received at all. Avon had no way of knowing that the message was already being intercepted by human deep space monitoring stations. As he finished the transmission, alarms began wailing throughout the facility. Through the communications array's massive windows, he could see the first Brutok landing craft descending through the atmosphere like falling stars. The Relani had sent their desperate plea into the void. Now all they could do was try to survive long enough for an answer to arrive. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Admiral Beth Torres continued sipping it anyway. Her habit of drinking terrible coffee during crisis situations had become legendary among the United Earth Defense Fleet, though few understood it was her way of staying grounded when the weight of command threatened to overwhelm her. The Deep Space Monitoring Station at Luna Point had detected the alien transmissions 17 hours ago. The linguistics team had worked through the night, their quantum processors struggling to decode the desperate message from a species humanity had never encountered. When they finally broke the encryption, the translated words had sent shockwaves through every level of Earth's government. Torres stood before the largest holographic display Earth had ever constructed, showing a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red zones marked Brutok-controlled territory, expanding like a cancer across peaceful civilizations. Blue dots represented the remaining Relani worlds, flickering and disappearing with each updated intelligence report. President Harrison Chen materialized in the command center via quantum teleportation, still wearing his pajamas under a hastily donned military jacket. Behind him came Defense Secretary Maria Santos and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Robert Kim. The speed of their arrival spoke volumes about how seriously Earth was taking first contact. "Give me the situation, Admiral," President Chen said without preamble. Torres activated the tactical display. Approximately 72 hours ago, the Relani Federation transmitted what appears to be a general distress call. They're facing extinction from an aggressive species called the Brutok Empire. Based on our long-range sensors and intercepted communications, the Relani are completely outmatched. "What do we know about these Brutok?" asked General Kim. "Hostile, conquest-oriented civilization with superior numbers and firepower. They appear to follow a doctrine of total warfare with no regard for civilian populations. Standard galactic military thinking seems to involve long-range engagements with minimal casualties. The Brutok ignore these conventions entirely." Defense. Secretary Santos leaned forward. "And the Relani?" "Peaceful to the point of helplessness. Their message indicates they have no concept of warfare as we understand it. They're asking us to teach them how to fight for survival." President Chen studied the display thoughtfully. "This is humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, and they're asking us to join a war." "Not join, sir. Lead, from what I can. Determine no species in this sector has experience with the kind of warfare humanity considers routine. We may be their only hope." The weight of the moment settled over the room. For decades, humanity had wondered how first contact would unfold. Philosophers and scientists had imagined peaceful exchanges of knowledge, cultural sharing, and gradual integration into galactic society. None had imagined aliens begging Earth's warriors to save them from extinction. General Kim broke the silence. "What kind of force would we need?" Torres had been preparing for this question. "The Third Fleet under Captain Rex Morgan has been running deep space exercises near the galactic edge. 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, support vessels, and a full Marine expeditionary force. More than enough to make an impression. "Admiral," President Chen said slowly, "I need to know your honest assessment. Can we make a difference?" Torres looked at the tactical display showing Brutok advance. Patterns. "Mr. President, these Brutok fight like ancient human warlords. Massed attacks, intimidation tactics, overwhelming force against soft targets. They've never faced disciplined resistance from a species that understands warfare. Based on their operational patterns, they're tactically primitive despite superior technology." "You sound confident." "Sir, humanity has been perfecting the art of killing each other for over 10,000 years. We've fought wars in every environment our planet could produce. We've developed tactics for fighting in space, underwater, underground, and in conditions that would kill most species. These Brutok have been conquering peaceful civilizations. They've never faced predators." President Chen nodded slowly. "Very well. Authorize Operation Guardian Angel. Admiral Torres, you have full authority to deploy the Third Fleet to Rilani space." The next 18 hours transformed Luna Point into a hurricane of activity. Captain Rex Morgan received his orders while conducting combat exercises in the asteroid belt. His response had been simple. Finally, something worth fighting for. The UES Retribution, humanity's most advanced dreadnought, became the operation's flagship. Built with lessons learned from centuries of naval warfare and adapted for space combat, she represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Her crew of 800 included veterans from conflicts across Earth's solar system, men and women who had trained their entire lives for battles they hoped would never come. Colonel James River commanded the Marine contingent, 5,000, soldiers equipped with powered armor and weapons designed for boarding actions that most galactic species considered impossible. His troops had practiced close-quarters combat in every conceivable environment, from the methane storms of Titan to the crushing depths of Europa's oceans. Commander Lisa Hayes served as the fleet's strategic intelligence officer, tasked with understanding alien psychology and warfare. She had spent her career studying human conflicts throughout history, from ancient battles to modern space engagements. Now she faced the challenge of applying those lessons to entirely alien opponents. The fleet's departure from Earth space drew crowds to observation platforms across the solar system. Humanity was going to war for the first time in 50 years, not for conquest or resources, but to save strangers who had asked for their help. As the ships engaged their quantum drives and prepared for the jump to Rilani space, Admiral Torres transmitted a message to the Rilani Federation. The linguistics team had improved their translation protocols, and the message was clear and direct. To the Rilani Federation, this is Admiral Beth Torres of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We received your transmission. Help is coming. We are not your saviors, but we stand with those who cannot stand alone. Prepare your people for war, but remember that war is not an end in itself. It is a tool to preserve peace. Earth will teach you to fight, but only so you never have to fight again. The quantum drives engaged, tearing holes in space-time that allowed the human fleet to cross impossible distances in hours instead of centuries. As they traveled toward an alien war, each crew member understood they were making history. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence would not be peaceful, exploration, or scientific exchange. It would be written in fire and blood, as so much of human history had been written before. The dying screams of Rilani civilians echoed across the emergency frequencies as warlord Krev Maxon watched his forces reduce another city to rubble. From the command deck of his flagship Bloodfang, he could see the elegant spires of the planetary, capital crumbling under sustained bombardment. The Rilani had stopped fighting days ago, but Maxon continued the bombardment anyway. Fear was a weapon, and dead civilizations served as excellent warnings to others. His communication officer, a scarred Brutok warrior named Gorak, approached with obvious hesitation. "Warlord, we're detecting unknown energy signatures at the system's edge." Maxon barely glanced away from the destruction below. "More Rilani refugees attempting to escape. Destroy them." "Sir, these signatures don't match any known Rilani vessel configuration. The energy output is significant." This got Maxon's attention. He turned from the viewport to study the tactical display. 12 large contacts had appeared seemingly from nowhere, followed by dozens of smaller vessels. Their quantum signatures were unlike anything in the Brutok database. "Identification?" Maxon demanded. "Unknown, sir. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but the language is completely alien." Maxon felt a stirring of interest rather than concern. Perhaps another species had come to contest his claim to this system. It had been too long since he had faced worthy opponents. "Open a channel. Let's see what these newcomers want." The view screen activated, showing a human face for the first time in Brutok history. Captain Rex Morgan looked exactly like what he was, a professional killer shaped by evolution and training into the perfect predator. His cold blue eyes examined Maxon with the calculating gaze of someone assessing a target. "This is Captain Morgan, of the United Earth Defense Fleet," the human said through the translation protocols. "You are conducting genocide against a civilian population. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Maxon burst into laughter that echoed across his bridge. The human's appearance was utterly unimpressive. Small, soft-looking, with none of the natural weapons or armor that marked a true warrior species. "I am Warlord Krev Maxon of the Brutok Empire. This system belongs to me by right of conquest. I suggest you depart before I add your ships to the wreckage." Morgan's expression didn't change. "This is your final warning. Cease bombardment and withdraw." "Or what, little creature? You'll make me?" Maxon gestured to his tactical display showing 300 Brutok warships against 12 human vessels. "Your species has made a grave error interfering with Brutok conquest." "No," Morgan replied softly. "You have." The human transmission ended, and Maxon turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy them. Show these newcomers what happens when they challenge the Brutok Empire." The battle began like every other engagement in Brutok experience. His ships moved into standard long-range formations, preparing to wear down the enemy with sustained fire while maintaining safe distances. The humans, however, did something no civilization had ever done in recorded galactic history. They charged. The 12 human heavy cruisers accelerated directly toward the Brutok fleet at velocities that should have killed their crews. Instead of spreading into defensive formations, they compressed into a spearhead formation that drove straight through the center of Maxon's battle line. "Impossible," breathed Gorak as he watched the tactical display. "Those acceleration forces would liquefy any known species." The humans opened fire at point-blank range with weapons that defied galactic conventions. Instead of the elegant energy beams preferred by civilized species, they used kinetic projectiles, missiles, and focused plasma streams designed to cause maximum destruction. Brutok shields, designed to deflect long-range energy weapons, offered little protection against tungsten rods traveling at relativistic speeds. 3 Brutok destroyers disappeared in the first exchange, their hulls cracked open like eggs. The remaining human ships scattered into attack patterns that seemed impossible to track, moving in 3 dimensions with precision that spoke of countless hours of combat training. "Sir," the tactical officer reported with growing panic. "They're closing for boarding actions." Maxon stared at the display in disbelief. Boarding actions had been theoretical military doctrine for centuries. No species actually attempted to board enemy vessels during battle. The risks were enormous, the casualties unacceptable. The humans apparently disagreed. Colonel James River led the first boarding party personally, his powered armor allowing him to survive in the vacuum between ships. His Marines used controlled explosions to breach the Brutok hull, then poured through the opening with weapons firing. The Brutok crew, trained for long-range combat, had never faced enemies in their own corridors. River moved through the ship like a force of nature, his armor sensors tracking every Brutok soldier while his weapons eliminated them with mechanical precision. His troops advanced in perfect coordination, using tactics developed in the cramped corridors of space stations and underground bunkers on Earth. The Brutok discovered that their superior size and natural weapons meant nothing in close combat, against enemies who had evolved to hunt creatures far larger and more dangerous than themselves. Human tactics assumed the enemy would be stronger, faster, and more heavily armed. They compensated with superior coordination, better equipment, and an absolute refusal to retreat. Within 30 minutes, the first Brutok warship had surrendered. Within an hour, 5 more had fallen to boarding parties. The remaining Brutok fleet began to withdraw in confusion and growing terror. Maxon watched his forces retreat and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine fear. These humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They showed no regard for acceptable casualties, no respect for the established rules of civilized warfare. "Warlord," Gorak reported, "the humans are transmitting to all vessels." Captain Morgan's face reappeared on the view screen. This time, however, his expression had changed. The cold assessment was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Controlled fury. "Warlord Maxon, you have 10 minutes to order the complete withdrawal of your forces from this system. Any ship that remains will be destroyed. Any ship that fires on civilian targets will be hunted down and eliminated regardless of where it flees. This is not a negotiation." Maxon tried to summon his usual arrogance. "You dare threaten the Brutok Empire? We have fleets beyond counting, armies that span 100 worlds. Then you'll have plenty of targets for us to practice on," Morgan replied. "But you're going to start learning today that genocide has consequences." 9 minutes. The transmission ended, leaving Maxon staring at a tactical display that showed his remaining forces fleeing in disorder. For the first time in his career, he gave the order to retreat from a battle he might have won through sheer numbers. As the Brutok fleet withdrew from Rilani space, emergency channels across the sector carried the news. The humans had arrived, and everything had changed. Species that had cowered before Brutok might were now watching recordings of human marines boarding enemy ships in the middle of battle. In the Rilani capital, Dr. Avon Koril watched the human ships establish protective orbits around his world. The creatures he had summoned were everything he had feared, and more than he had dared to hope. They were indeed killers from a death world. But they were his killers now. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire through a dry forest. The Brutok Empire, unstoppable conquerors who had crushed 17 civilizations in 3 months, had been defeated by 12 ships crewed by unknown aliens from the galactic rim. Species that had hidden behind locked borders for months now watched their emergency communication networks with growing amazement as reports poured in from every corner of Brutok space. Commander Lisa Hayes stood in the intelligence center of the UES Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing the rapidly changing tactical situation. The victory at Rilani Prime had been just the beginning. Word of the human intervention had reached occupied Rilani colonies, and desperate resistance movements were emerging from hiding to fight alongside their unexpected saviors. "Commander," called Lieutenant Davis from the communications station, "we're receiving transmission from the Nalori Collective. They're requesting immediate military assistance. The Brutok are threatening to execute civilian hostages if they don't surrender their core worlds." Hayes frowned at the strategic display. The Nalori system was 3 days' travel at maximum speed, and intelligence reports suggested the Brutok had positioned significant forces there. "What does Captain Morgan say?" "He's already plotting the jump coordinates. Colonel River is preparing assault teams for a hostage rescue operation. Dr. Avon Coral observed this exchange with continuing amazement. He had spent the past week aboard the human flagship, serving as both cultural liaison and scientific observer. The humans had welcomed him with a mixture of professional courtesy and genuine warmth that contradicted everything he had expected from a warrior species. Dr. Coral, Hayes addressed him directly, we need to understand Brutok psychology. Based on your research, how will they respond to losing face this badly? Avon consulted his portable database, cross-referencing human tactical assessments with his own observations of Brutok behavior patterns. In my analysis, they will likely become more desperate and unpredictable. Brutok culture is built around dominance through superior violence. Your victory challenges their fundamental worldview. So they'll escalate, Hayes concluded. Almost certainly. But they may also make mistakes. Brutok tactics depend on intimidating opponents who fear death more than dishonor. You have shown them enemies who fight harder when threatened. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. Captain Morgan needs to hear this. The Bridge of the Retribution had become the de facto command center for an expanding liberation campaign. Captain Rex. Morgan stood before the main display, studying intelligence reports from across the sector, while his officers coordinated with resistance movements on a dozen worlds. Captain, Hayes reported, Dr. Coral believes the Brutok will escalate their tactics in response to our victories. Morgan didn't look away from the display. How so? Avon stepped forward, his translator working to convert his rapid speech into human language. Warlord Maxon has reportedly executed several subordinate commanders who retreated from human forces. The Brutok leadership is implementing what your military would call scorched earth policies. If they cannot hold territory, they will ensure it has no value to liberation forces. Meaning, civilian massacres on an unprecedented scale. The Brutok would rather rule over graveyards than admit defeat. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Morgan finally turned from the display, his expression grim. Then we need to move faster than they can kill. How many ships do we have operational? All 12 heavy cruisers, 38 destroyers, and full marine complement, reported his tactical officer. But Captain, we're already spread thin. Intelligence shows Brutok forces on 15 different worlds with civilian populations under threat. Then we divide the fleet. Hayes, I need you to identify priority targets based on civilian population density and strategic value. River, can your Marines handle simultaneous operations across multiple systems? Colonel River, attending the briefing via holographic projection from the Marine barracks, nodded grimly. My people have been training for exactly this scenario. We can conduct coordinated strikes across 12 systems simultaneously. Dr. Coral listened to this planning session with growing awe and terror. The humans were discussing military operations that would have been impossible for any known species. They spoke casually of dividing their forces to fight battles across light years of space simultaneously, coordinating attacks with split-second timing across impossible distances. Dr. Coral, Captain Morgan addressed him directly, I need to ask you something that might be difficult. We can save more lives if we understand how the Brutok think. Are there any psychological pressure points we can exploit? Avon considered the question carefully. Brutok society is rigidly hierarchical. Individual commanders have absolute authority within their spheres, but they also bear complete responsibility for failure. If you can make their individual leaders look weak or incompetent in front of their own forces, their own troops might turn on them. Hayes finished. Classic human tactic. Undermine enemy leadership by making them appear ineffective. The liberation of the Nalori system became a textbook example of human psychological warfare. Instead of attacking the Brutok fleet directly, Colonel Rivers' Marines conducted precision strikes against supply depots and communication facilities. They moved like ghosts through the system, appearing where least expected and vanishing before the Brutok could respond. The Brutok commander, General Vrak Thorn, found himself chasing shadows while his own forces began questioning his competence. When human ships finally engaged his fleet in open battle, half his captains hesitated to follow his orders. The resulting confusion allowed the humans to rescue over 1 million Nalori civilians while destroying the entire Brutok garrison. News of the Nalori liberation reached Earth just as Admiral Torres was briefing the United Nations Security Council on the expanding conflict. The chamber fell silent as she displayed recordings of human Marines evacuating alien families while under fire, protecting beings they had never seen before from enemies they barely understood. "Admiral," asked the Secretary General, "what are the long-term implications of our involvement in this conflict?" Torres had been dreading this question. "Mr. Secretary General, we're not just fighting a war. We're fundamentally changing the balance of power in this region of the galaxy. Every species is watching to see what kind of neighbors humanity will be. And what are we showing them? That Earth will protect those who cannot protect themselves. That genocide is unacceptable regardless of species, but also that humanity is very, very good at warfare." The recording from Nalori showed human soldiers sharing their rations with rescued civilians, medics treating wounded aliens with the same care they would show their own species, engineers working alongside local resistance fighters to repair damaged infrastructure. But it also showed the methodical efficiency with which human forces eliminated Brutok resistance. The galaxy was learning that Earth's children were indeed dangerous, but their danger was directed outward toward those who threatened the innocent. The humans had not come as conquerors, but as guardians, and that distinction was reshaping interstellar politics with every victory. Dr. Coriel transmitted his daily report to the surviving Rilani Council, documenting everything he observed about human military culture. His people needed to understand their saviors, but more importantly, they needed to understand the responsibility that came with human protection. The humans fought not for glory or conquest, but because they believed civilized beings had a duty to defend those who could not defend themselves. It was a concept that would spread across the galaxy, carrying with it the promise that never again would peaceful species face extinction alone. The age of predatory conquest was ending, replaced by something new: peace through strength, protection through power, and the understanding that true civilization was measured not by what a species could destroy, but by what it chose to preserve. The war ended not with a single climactic battle, but with the sound of silence across 100 worlds where Brutok war drums had finally stopped beating. In the command center of the Galactic Council's emergency session, representatives from 47 species watched the final tactical reports with a mixture of relief and bewilderment. The Brutok Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just months before, had simply collapsed. Dr. Avon Correll stood before the assembled delegates, no longer the frightened scientist who had transmitted humanity's first contact message, but Earth's unofficial ambassador to the galaxy. Behind him, holographic displays showed the transformed political landscape of the Outer Rim territories. Red zones marking Brutok conquest had been replaced by blue indicators showing human-protected space, with green markers representing newly established interspecies defense zones. "Honored delegates," Avon began, his translator converting his words into dozens of languages simultaneously, "I present the final report on the Brutok conflict and humanity's role in its resolution." The Vorthan representative, Ambassador Quillen Derex, leaned forward with barely concealed anxiety. His species had been the Brutok Empire's next target before the humans arrived. "Dr. Coriel, the Council requires clarification on human intentions. Their military capabilities far exceed anything we previously believed possible. What assurance do we have that Earth won't become the next conquering empire?" Avon activated the display showing human fleet movements over the past month. Instead of the expected expansion patterns of a conquering force, the data showed systematic withdrawal to defensive positions around liberated worlds. "Ambassador Derex, observed the human deployment strategy. They could have claimed every former Brutok territory. Instead, they have established what they call protective cordons around threatened systems while returning governance to local populations. But surely they demand tribute, resources, some form of compensation for their military assistance? Pressed Counselor Evan Thale, Avon's own colleague from the Rilani delegation. None. The humans have actually provided reconstruction assistance to damaged worlds. Their engineers work alongside local populations to rebuild infrastructure. Their medical teams treat wounded civilians regardless of species. They ask for nothing beyond cooperation in establishing mutual defense agreements. The chamber erupted in confused discussions. The concept of military intervention without conquest was so foreign to galactic thinking that many delegates struggled to comprehend it. Species across the galaxy had watched in amazement as human forces liberated world. After world, then simply left, turning control back to the original inhabitants. Admiral Beth Torres materialized in the chamber via quantum hologram, her image sharp enough to show the fatigue lines around her eyes. The past months had aged her considerably, but her bearing remained that of someone who had accomplished exactly what she set out to do. Admiral Torres, the Council Secretary-General began formally. The Galactic Council recognizes Earth's decisive intervention in the Brutok conflict. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership in the galactic community, along with all associated rights and responsibilities. Torres nodded respectfully. The United Earth government is honored by the offer. However, we have conditions that must be addressed before accepting membership. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. No species had ever imposed conditions. On council membership, please state your terms, the Secretary-General replied carefully. First, any future acts of genocide or systematic extermination of civilian populations will be considered acts of war against Earth specifically. We will respond accordingly. Second, the Galactic Council will establish and fund an interspecies defense force with authority to intervene in conflicts involving civilian populations. Third, all member species commit to mutual defense agreements that apply regardless of species, homeworld, or political system. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications. Earth was not asking to join the galactic community as just another member species. They were demanding fundamental changes to how the galaxy functioned. Counselor Thale stood slowly. Admiral, you're describing a complete transformation of galactic politics. Many species will resist such changes. Torres's expression didn't change. Counselor, 3 months ago, your people sent a desperate message asking for help because the existing galactic order had failed you completely. We answered that call. Now we're offering to ensure no species ever has to send such a message again. And if we refuse these conditions? Asked Ambassador Derex. Then Earth remains a friendly neighbor willing to trade and cooperate. But we will not be bound by council authority in matters of defending civilian populations. We will continue to respond to calls for help as we see fit. The implication was clear. Humanity would act as the galaxy's protector, whether officially sanctioned or not. The only question was whether they would do so within the existing political framework or outside it. Dr. Corral stepped forward again. If I may address the Council, I have spent months observing human military culture firsthand. I believe I understand what Admiral Torres is offering. He activated a new display showing human military doctrine and rules of engagement. Humans do not make war the way other species understand it. They have what they call laws of war that govern how conflicts may be conducted. These laws prioritize civilian protection above military efficiency. They will accept higher casualties to avoid harming non-combatants. But their effectiveness against the Brutok suggests otherwise, observed the Zephyrian delegate. Their effectiveness comes from superior training, coordination, and willingness to accept personal risk, not from disregard for civilian life. Human soldiers are taught that protecting innocents is more important than their own survival. This makes them more dangerous to enemies, not less careful with civilians. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Species after species rose to speak, sharing stories of human intervention in their territories. The Nalori described human Marines who had risked their lives to rescue civilians from Brutok execution chambers. The Kalani reported human engineers working 18-hour shifts to restore water purification systems to refugee camps. The Thrakari told of human medics who had saved thousands of lives during the siege of their homeworld. The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Every member species accepted humanity's conditions for joining the galactic community. Admiral Torres smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Then let me introduce you to your new neighbors. Earth accepts membership in the Galactic Council and commits to the defense of all peaceful species within our sphere of influence. 6 months later, Captain Rex Morgan stood on the observation deck of the new Interspecies Defense Force headquarters, orbiting the former Brutok capital world. The planet below showed signs of remarkable recovery. Former Brutok military installations had been converted to schools and hospitals. The massive weapons factories now produced medical equipment and agricultural machinery. Warlord Krev Maxon himself sat in a rehabilitation facility on the planet's surface, undergoing psychological treatment alongside thousands of former Brutok soldiers. The humans had introduced a concept completely foreign to galactic justice, the possibility of redemption through service. Former warriors were learning to be builders, teachers, and healers. Strange sight, isn't it? Morgan turned to find Dr. Coral approaching, carrying a data pad filled with his latest research. The Relani scientist had become one of humanity's closest allies, serving as a bridge between human military culture and galactic civilian populations. "What's strange?" Morgan asked. 6 months ago, this world was the center of an empire built on conquest and terror. Now it's becoming a symbol of rehabilitation and hope. Your species has a remarkable ability to see potential where others see only problems. Morgan shrugged. Humans learned a long time ago that defeated enemies make better friends than slaves. We've had plenty of practice turning battlefields into gardens. The other species are still trying to understand that philosophy. Many believe strength must be used for domination. Then they've never been truly strong. Real strength is having the power to destroy something and choosing to protect it instead. Dr. Coral made notes on his data pad. "I'm documenting human philosophical approaches to warfare for the Council archives." That quote will be prominently featured. Through the viewport, they could see human ships on patrol alongside vessels from a dozen other species. The sight that had once meant conquest and terror now represented protection and cooperation. The galaxy had learned that the humans from Earth were indeed dangerous, but their danger was carefully controlled and precisely directed. Commander Lisa Hayes joined them at the viewport, carrying reports from across the sector. "Captain, the Bat. Latest intelligence reports show 0 active conflicts in human-protected space. Piracy is down 90%. Trade is up 400%. Every species is reporting population growth and economic expansion." "Any problems?" Morgan asked. "Just one. The Council is receiving requests for human protection from species outside our current sphere of influence. The Andrari Coalition has formally requested membership in the Interspecies Defense Force. So have the Meridian Republic and the Outer Spiral Alliance." Morgan nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need more ships, more Marines, more everything. Admiral Torres is already in discussions with Earth Command about expanding the fleet. President Chen has authorized construction of 50 new vessels specifically for peacekeeping operations." Dr. Coral looked up from his data pad with curiosity. "Captain, doesn't this concern your people? Taking responsibility for so many species, across such vast distances?" Morgan was quiet for a long moment, watching the peaceful activity on the planet below. "Dr. Coral, when your people sent that first message to Earth, They offered us everything they had in exchange for survival. They were willing to give up their independence, their resources, their entire civilization just for the chance to continue existing. Yes, we were desperate. And we never asked for any of it. We came because you needed help, not because we wanted to rule you. That's what humans call duty. When you have the power to help, you have the responsibility to use it, even when it costs you so much, especially then. The galaxy spent centuries believing that might makes right, that the strong naturally prey on the weak. We're showing them something different. Strength exists to protect those who can't protect themselves. Dr. Coral made more notes, then looked up with a slight smile. The human concept of duty is becoming very popular among younger generations across the galaxy. Military academies are reporting increased enrollment. Peace Corps-style organizations are forming on dozens of worlds. Your people have started something remarkable. Commander Hayes activated her communication device. Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Torres. Priority Alpha. Admiral Torres's hologram appeared in the observation lounge, her expression serious but not grim. Captain Morgan, we've received another first contact situation. Long-range sensors have detected what appears to be a refugee fleet approaching from the galactic core. Preliminary analysis suggests they're fleeing from something called the Void Hunters. Morgan straightened. Orders, Admiral? The third. Fleet is to intercept and provide assistance. Standard first contact protocols apply, but be prepared for anything. If these Void Hunters are forcing entire species to flee their homeworlds, we may be facing something worse than the Brutok. Understood. We'll be ready. Torres's image flickered out, leaving the three of them alone with the weight of a new crisis. Dr. Coral looked worried, but Morgan and Hayes seemed almost relieved. You're looking forward to this, Coral observed. Morgan nodded. Doctor, for the first time in human history, we know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We're not explorers or conquerors or merchants. We're guardians. And the galaxy needs guardians. As the human fleet prepared for another unknown challenge, the transformed political landscape of local space continued to evolve. Trade routes that had been abandoned during the Brutok expansion reopened under human protection. Research stations that had been destroyed were rebuilt with improved defenses. Most importantly, species that had lived in fear for generations began to believe in the possibility of lasting peace. The humans had kept their promise. They had taught the galaxy to fight, but more importantly, they had shown it how to live without fear. In doing so, they had found their own purpose among the stars, not as conquerors of worlds, but as defenders of the innocent, protectors of the peaceful, and guardians of hope itself. The age of predatory conquest was over.